There is one concept live poker players do not understand, and it makes the game way harder than it needs to be. I have been a winning poker pro for 7 straight years, and it is something I use in every live session. In this video, I am going to break down exactly what it is and how you can use it to start making better decisions and winning more money right away. The concept is going to be illustrated right away when I am dealt King 8 suited in the under the gun straddle of a 2-5 game. My opponent in low jack is going to be opening 3.5x to $35. It folds to me and I will put in a call. We go heads up to a flop of ace-6-5, 2 diamonds. This is an extremely good flop for my exact hand and my range as well, even though there is an ace on the board. Not being the pre-flop aggressor, I will start out with a check. My opponent is going to place an almost pot-sized wager, making it $65 to go. We are facing an extremely big bet here, which is not the most fun, but there are a lot of advantages we have on this board. We are drawn to the nuts, aka the best hand possible if we were to hit any diamond on the turn or the river. Also, the backdoor equity we have here is super important as well. Do you see it? We are able to turn a 7 to be open-ended for a straight, which will be the nuts very often, or even a 4 to give us 4 additional outs to a gutter straight draw. Lastly, keep in mind, just because your opponent fires a big bet on an ace-high board does not mean they have the ace. You may believe the bigger someone bets, the more they have it, but people at low stakes use all kinds of bet sizes in many situations. Because of this breakdown, we are going to apply the concept you need to understand and use more, and it is check raising more in your games. A check call line is way easier to play against compared to a check raise line because now we are taking over the aggression. It is not that the most aggressive poker player always wins the most, but more so well-timed and thought-out aggression will produce higher profits. I would check raise almost 4x their bet size, yes, this is very big, and make it $240 to go. After a couple of seconds, my opponent folds their hand. Learning well-timed aggression is something I teach everyone who works with me in my private one-on-one coaching sessions. I never offer group sessions, so you will always have my undivided attention as we work to improve your game. You can book an initial session today by scanning the QR code or clicking the link in the pinned comment. This next hand, we will have a different situation, even though I am in the straddle again with King 4 suited. Under the gun +1 raises $25. It folds to cutoff, and they put in a call. It folds to me in the straddle, and I will be calling too. This time we are three-handed, headed to a flop of 5-3-5 rainbow. I will check, and the pre-flop aggressor is going to be placing a C bet, aka continuation bet, for $20. Cutoff is going to fold their hand. Now, this is a bit of a different situation because even though cutoff folded, this is a C-bet multi-way and not a C-bet heads up. In theory, my opponent should C-bet this spot less, but in reality, people do not always make the appropriate adjustments for the amount of players in a pot. One factor that holds true is my opponent did RFI or raise first in from under the gun, so they are going to have a tighter range. I will have to be crazy to check raise here with no made hand, right? This time, I do not even have a flush draw, but I do have backdoor equity to straights and flushes. Yes, it has to come runner, but my opponent will still have C bets that cannot defend a check raise. Also, I will have infinitely more 5x than my opponent for trips, and hitting a king at some point may end up being the best hand. Because of all these reasons, we will go for the check raise with our mediocre holding here and make it $65 to go. Preferably, we would want to fold in this spot, but unfortunately, my opponent is going to call. Yes, this is the risk we take sometimes when we use this concept, but all this means is we have 2 more streets of poker to play. We go to the turn and it comes the King of Hearts. Even though we hit the king here, we do have problems in the kicker category. Also, any king or ace coming on the turn are going to be much better for under the gun plus one's range than mine. Sometimes in poker, you have to respect someone's range and not play your exact hold'em, so I will check my option. Villain decides they will fire out a bet here and makes it $145 to go, about 66% of the pot. Things are feeling a bit scary, but this is okay. I have a pair, and we did not come this far to start folding now, as my opponent can bluff on this card. Even the most novice of players know if a king or ace comes here on the turn, they can have it. The key word is can, and it is a good enough reason to fire out a bet here, so I will continue. We go to the river, and it comes the jack of clubs. This is a great river because now I have a good kicker with my top pair as the jack will play. The heart flush draw from the turn also missed. I check my option. After a couple of seconds, my opponent is going to check back. I turn over my king four suited and my opponent will be mucking their cards. We win a big pot for $267. The main focus here though is finding the scary check raise on the flop with no made hand and being able to navigate the turn and river. The more you put yourself in these situations, the more experience there is to be gained for your poker game. Different situation once again, as we are going to be in a blind versus blind configuration. I am dealt king 9 suited in the small blind in a 2-5 game with no straddle. I will raise it up to $15. Villain in big blind will be put in a call. We go heads up to a flop of queen deuce 4 with 2 hearts. Here, many players would love to go for a c-bet always since they have a king-high flush draw. We are technically drawing to the second nuts. To apply the concept again, we cannot be aggressive yet, so I will check. My opponent puts a bet of $15 in the pot, and this is exactly what I wanted. This is how you stay less predictable in poker when you don't always take the most obvious line. If we always bet when we have it, we will never have any hands when we find checks here. Also, ranges are very wide in a blind versus blind spot, so there is even a higher percent chance villain may not have a hand here and folds. I would check raise a little over 3x, making it $50 to go. After a couple of seconds, my opponent is going to fold and show pocket jacks. There are a lot of points to make here, but I want to focus on two mainly. First, I managed to take down this pot, making $30 without ever making my hand. I had a draw, and there is no guarantee I would have hit a heart or a king to beat my opponent on the turn or the river. Second, they folded a made hand to my check raise, which they should have found a call. Poker becomes easier understanding this one concept of check raising more, and it is more difficult for opponents to play against. They do not know how to defend properly in aggressive lines. To become more difficult to play against, scan this QR code or click the link in the pinned comment to work with me in a private one-on-one coaching session. I have coached losing and break-even players into winners, and you can check the testimonials from everyday players like you on my website. Even if you are a winner, you can still improve dramatically. In this next hand, we will be playing 5-10, and I will be dealt king 10 suited in low jack position. The concept will be used again, but this time it will not be on the flop. I opened 3.5x to $35 because there was an extra blind posted at the table. We will have two callers in cutoff and on the button. We are headed three ways to a flop of king 10-8 rainbow. This is a beautiful flop as I have top two pair, so there is not many hands I will be behind to. All the previous hands involved me never being the pre-flop aggressor, but now I am. I will find a c-bet for $40. Cutoff is going to call and the button is going to fold. We go heads up to the turn and it comes the 6 of diamonds. Beautiful turn as I now have additional equity to the second best hand possible with a king high flush draw. My opponent could have turned a straight with 9-7 suited, but it would be at a super low frequency. Because of this, I am comfortable firing a double barrel for $130. It takes them a little bit more time, but they still come along with the call. The river is where the hand becomes a lot more interesting as it comes to 10 of clubs. At this point, I have the nuts as my opponent is never going to have pocket kings here as they would 3-bet preflop. We can confidently eliminate this hand from our opponent's range. When you see that you have this full house on the river, where is your thought process going initially? Majority of the time, people are thinking, I have the nuts, and what amount can I bet here to make sure my opponent always finds a call? I do not want to bet too big, and then they fold too much. This is not how you should be thinking about this situation. We instead need to begin thinking about our opponent's range. What worse hands can we get called by if we decide to fire this triple barrel? What hands can our opponent bluff with if we decide to check? Which one of these options is going to net the most winnings in the long term for this situation? Let's further break this down. If my opponent has trips, we all are aware if I check, they will for sure put in a bet themselves. This is one portion of their range that will always try to get called by worse hands in my range. If they did have the 9-7 suited from the turn that did not decide to raise, they will for sure fire out a bet themselves as well. Then they can also have a set of 8s or 6s from the flop and turn they decided to slow play. Instead, they could have just been allowing me to bluff into them since they had the positional advantage. They could believe I am an aggressive player as well. Now, let's focus on bluffs. What if they had Queen Jack or Jack 9 suited? What if they had Queen Jack offsuit, as this is a hand live players would call in cutoff against an open because they love Broadway cards? If I bet, can these hands call? Of course not. If I check, however, these hands can sometimes bluff. They will not always bluff, but at least we have a chance to make more money from that portion of our opponent's range. Lastly, if I were to always bet, my opponent would sometimes only call with a weaker 10x holding rather than raise in position. We are sitting about $1,300 effective, and there is $460 in the pot. We want to give ourselves the best opportunity to play for stacks in this situation. Because of all the factors I mentioned, I will use the concept we have been talking about this entire video and check my option. My opponent is doing exactly what I wanted them to do and places out a bet for $350. I now have accomplished everything I wanted to here. I announced to the dealer I am all in as we want to get paid the maximum with the best hand. After about 30 seconds, villain will put in an entire buy-in $1,000 by putting in a call. I let them know I have King 10 suited and they fold their cards while letting the entire table know they had 10-9 suited for weaker trips. This is the only live poker strategy guide you need to win in 2026. Learn multiple strategies and how to use them in your games by watching this next video right now.